The Ferengi overlords would soon learn the true meaning of the indomitable human spirit, when their arrogant attempts to subjugate mankind only ignited a firestorm of human resistance, ingenuity, and sheer determination that burned their empire to ashes. Thomas Miller marched down the ramp of the human shuttle onto the baking landing pad, squinting as the twin suns of the Ferengi homeworld blasted his face. Yaxer, his Ferengi counterpart, sneered at him with undisguised contempt, his rodent-like snout twitching. The Ferengi towered over the human, his technology and culture considered far superior. Yaxer led Thomas down echoing metal corridors into a vast council chamber. The Ferengi Council of Elders perched on elevated platforms beneath shimmering holograms. They looked down their noses at Thomas and his delegation. The scarred leader spoke with a booming voice. "What can your primitive species possibly offer us? You are inferior, weak. Your tech is a joke." The Ferengi leader scoffed. "Prove it then, human. Pass the trials we set before you. Survive our challenges. Only then will we deem you worthy of an alliance. Fail, and your entire species will pay the price." Thomas clenched his fists. The lives of billions hung in the balance, threatened by Ferengi military might. To secure a peaceful trade deal, he would need to dig deep and demonstrate the depths of human grit and spirit. He only hoped he was up to the task. The trials were about to begin. As the council leader's words rang in his ears, two burly Ferengi guards flanked Thomas, escorting him from the chamber. They marched him through a labyrinth of gleaming corridors, deeper into the heart of the citadel. Thomas's mind raced as he tried to map the twists and turns, but the alien architecture confounded his sense of direction. At last they reached a small, sparse room. A hard cot jutted from one wall, and a tiny window let in the last rays of the setting suns. Yaxer stood waiting, his arms crossed and his snout wrinkled in a sneer. "Your first trial begins at dawn, human," Yaxer spat. "I suggest you rest while you can." With that, the Ferengi turned on his heel and stalked out, the guards following close behind. The door slammed shut with a resounding clang, leaving Thomas alone with his thoughts. It seemed he had only just closed his eyes when the door burst open, jolting him awake. The twin suns had barely crested the horizon, but the Ferengi guards were already hauling him to his feet. They marched him through the winding corridors once more, their grip on his arms unyielding. The guards shoved him through a towering archway, and Thomas found himself blinking in the harsh light of a massive arena. Thousands of Ferengi packed the stands, their jeers and taunts echoing off the high walls. In the center of the arena loomed a towering structure of smooth black metal, its peak seeming to pierce the sky. Yaxer appeared at Thomas's side, a smirk playing across his rodent-like features. "Your first trial, human," he said, gesturing to the structure, "the spire of strength. Reach the top, and you'll prove your physical prowess. Fail, and your delegation will be sent back to Earth in disgrace." Thomas approached the base of the spire, craning his neck to take in its dizzying height. The metal was smooth as glass, with no obvious handholds. He took a deep breath, trying to still the hammering of his heart. The crowd's jeers grew louder as Thomas placed his hands on the spire, searching for any small crevice or ridge to grip. Finding none, he began to climb, his fingers scrabbling against the slick surface. Hours crawled by as Thomas inched his way up the spire, the suns beating down on his back. His muscles screamed with the effort, and sweat poured down his face, stinging his eyes. Halfway up, a sudden gust of wind tore at his clothes, threatening to rip him away from the spire. Thomas clung on, his fingers aching, his jaw clenched with determination. As the suns began to sink below the horizon, Thomas hauled himself over the top of the spire, his hands raw and bleeding. The Ferengi crowd fell silent, stunned by his achievement. Far below, Yaxer glowered up at him, his face twisted with disbelief. Thomas began the long climb down, his body trembling with fatigue. As his feet touched the ground, the council leader stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "You have passed the first trial, human," he said, his voice cold. "But do not let this victory go to your head. The true test of your spirit has only just begun. Thomas barely had time to catch his breath before the guards returned, escorting him from the arena. They led him through a maze of corridors deeper into the heart of the Ferengi citadel. Thomas's mind raced with questions, wondering what new challenge awaited him. At last they reached a small, dimly lit chamber. A single Ferengi, an elderly male with gleaming cybernetic implants, stood waiting. Yaksa entered behind Thomas, a smirk playing across his rodent-like features. "Your second trial human is one of mental fortitude," Yaksa explained, gesturing to the elderly Ferengi. "This is Zorax, the Empire's most skilled mental interrogator. He will probe your mind, seeking to uncover your deepest fears and weaknesses. Resist his interrogation, and you will prove the strength of your human spirit." Thomas, his body still aching from the climb, straightened his shoulders and met Zorax's gaze. The interrogator's cybernetic eye glowed an eerie red as he approached, his steps slow and deliberate. "Prepare yourself, human," Zorax said, his voice a rasping whisper. "No one has ever withstood my mental assault." Before Thomas could respond, Zorax placed his hands on the human's temples. In an instant, Thomas's mind was flooded with visions of his darkest nightmares. He saw Earth, ravaged by war and famine, the once thriving cities reduced to rubble. His loved ones, his family and friends lay suffering and dying in the streets. Above it all loomed the shadow of the Ferengi Empire, their advanced weapons poised to strike the final blow. Thomas's knees buckled under the mental onslaught, a scream tearing from his throat. But even as he felt himself slipping into despair, a flicker of defiance sparked within him. He focused on his memories of Earth's triumphs, of the resilience and courage that had carried humanity through countless trials. He recalled the stories of heroes who had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious, their spirits unbroken. Slowly, painfully, Thomas pushed back against Zorax's invasion. He built a fortress of determination and hope around his mind, brick by brick, until the interrogator's probing thoughts could find no purchase. Sweat beaded on Thomas's brow, his jaw clenched with effort, but he refused to yield. After what felt like an eternity, Zorax staggered back, his cybernetic implant sparking and smoking. "Impossible," he whispered, his voice tinged with awe. "No one has ever resisted my interrogation." Thomas, his chest heaving with exertion, looked to Yaksa and the council leader. "The human spirit is not so easily broken," he declared, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. The council leader nodded, a hint of respect in his eyes. "Indeed, human, you have proven your mental fortitude, but there is one final trial that awaits you, one that will test your spirit to its very limits." The council leader gestured to Yaksa. "Take the human to the maze of despair. There he will face his final trial. If he succeeds, we will discuss an alliance." Yaksa led Thomas to a waiting hovercraft. They sped across barren, rocky terrain, the twin suns beating down. Thomas's exhaustion from the previous trials dragged at his bones, but he forced himself to stay alert. After hours of travel, they arrived at the mouth of a massive cave. Yaksa turned to Thomas, his features cast in shadow. "This is the entrance to the maze of despair. Many have entered, seeking to prove their worth, but none have ever emerged." Thomas peered into the yawning darkness. A cold draught wafted from the depths, carrying the scent of ancient dust and decay. "Your task is to navigate the maze," Yaksa continued, "and reach the center where a powerful artifact awaits. Retrieve it, and you will have proven the strength of your human spirit." Thomas squared his shoulders. "I accept the challenge." Yaksa handed him a small pack. "Take this. It contains a meager supply of food and water, a glow rod, and a communication device. We will be monitoring your progress." With a deep breath, Thomas stepped into the maze. The darkness engulfed him, and the entrance disappeared from view, leaving only the narrow beam of his glow rod to light the way. The labyrinth was unlike anything Thomas had ever encountered. The walls seemed to shift and change, the corridors rearranging themselves as he walked. More than once, he found himself at a dead end, forced to retrace his steps. Strange sounds echoed through the tunnels, the skitter of claws on stone, the rasp of breath from unseen lungs. Thomas caught glimpses of movement in the shadows, but the creatures always vanished before he could get a clear look. Hours turned into days. Thomas's supplies dwindled, his stomach cramping with hunger. His limbs trembled with exhaustion, but still he pressed on, marking his path with scratches on the walls. Just as despair began to set in, Thomas stumbled into a hidden chamber. The walls were adorned with ancient Ferengi glyphs, their meanings lost to time. In the center of the room, resting on a pedestal, was a small crystal orb. It pulsed with an inner light, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Thomas approached the pedestal, his heart pounding. As he reached for the orb, a guttural growl echoed from the shadows. He spun, glow rod held high. A monstrous creature emerged into the light. It was vaguely reptilian, with razor-sharp claws and a mouthful of jagged teeth. Its eyes glowed with a feral hunger as it stalked toward Thomas. Exhausted and unarmed, Thomas knew he stood no chance against the beast in a fair fight. He cast about desperately for a weapon, a plan, anything. His eyes fell on the glyphs on the walls. With a flash of insight, he realized they were not mere decorations, but instructions, a code. As the beast lunged, Thomas dove to the side. He scrambled to the nearest wall, running his fingers over the glyphs. The creature whirled, its claws scraping against the stone as it charged again. Thomas pressed the glyphs in sequence, praying his hunch was correct. With a rumble, a hidden door slid open in the wall. Thomas threw himself through the opening, slamming his hand against the glyphs on the other side. The door sealed shut, just as the beast crashed into it. Thomas heard it howling with rage, its claws scrabbling against the unyielding stone. But the door held fast. Panting, Thomas turned to find himself in a small, dimly lit room. In the center, hovering in a beam of light, was the artifact. Thomas approached, his hands trembling as they closed around the orb. It was warm to the touch, pulsing gently like a living heart. With the artifact secure in his pack, Thomas followed the hidden passage, winding his way through the bowels of the maze. After what felt like an eternity, he emerged into the blinding light of the Ferengi suns. Yaksa stood waiting, his eyes wide with disbelief as Thomas strode forward and placed the artifact at his feet. The human was battered, filthy, and utterly exhausted, but in his eyes burned a fierce light of triumph. The twin suns of the Ferengi homeworld beat down on Thomas as he emerged from the depths of the maze of despair. His clothes were tattered, his skin caked with grime, but in his hand he clutched the pulsing crystal orb, the artifact he had risked everything to obtain. Exhaustion dragged at Thomas's limbs, but he managed a triumphant smile as he placed the orb into Yaksa's waiting palm. The Ferengi turned it over in his hands, his eyes reflecting the pulsing light. "Incredible," Yaksa breathed. "In all our history, no one has ever completed the maze and retrieved the artifact." He looked up at Thomas, something like respect flickering in his gaze. "The council must be informed immediately. Come." Thomas followed Yaksa to a waiting hovercraft, his legs trembling with fatigue. The journey back to the citadel passed in a blur, the barren landscape giving way to towering spires of gleaming metal. As they entered the Grand Council chamber, a hush fell over the assembled Ferengi. Every eye was fixed on the artifact in Yaksa's hands. The council leader, his face lined with age and wisdom, stepped forward. "Human," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "you have done the impossible. You have proven the strength of your spirit, and in doing so, you have earned the respect of the Ferengi Empire." He took the artifact from Yaksa, holding it aloft. The orb's crystalline surface glinted in the light, casting eerie reflections on the walls. "This artifact is a sacred relic of our people," the council leader continued, "a symbol of power and wisdom. By retrieving it, you have shown that your spirit is worthy of wielding such power." Thomas stepped forward, sensing an opportunity. "If the Ferengi Empire truly respects the strength of the human spirit, then let us forge an alliance of equals. Let us work together, sharing our knowledge and resources to create a better future for both our peoples." The council leader nodded, a smile spreading across his face. "Wise words, human. The Ferengi Empire accepts your proposal. From this day forward, let our peoples be allies and friends, united in the strength of our spirits." As the council chamber erupted in applause, Thomas felt a surge of emotion. Pride, relief, a sense of accomplishment that went beyond mere personal achievement. He knew that the road ahead would be long and challenging, that this was just the first step in forging a lasting alliance. But with the indomitable human spirit and the newfound respect of the Ferengi Empire, Thomas was confident that humanity would thrive in this brave new era of interstellar cooperation. The future was bright, and he was ready to face it head-on. As the applause died down and the Ferengi Council dispersed, Thomas felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned to see Yaxa, his expression grave. "The council leader requests our presence immediately. A new development has arisen." Thomas followed Yaxa through the winding corridors of the Citadel, his mind still reeling from the events of the past few days. As they entered the council leader's private chambers, the elder Ferengi gestured for them to sit. "Our long-range sensors have detected an unidentified vessel entering our star system," the council leader said, his voice tight with concern. He waved his hand, and a holographic display flickered to life above the table. The image showed a massive ship, its hull a patchwork of unfamiliar technology. "We've attempted to hail them, but they're not responding." Thomas leaned forward, studying the hologram. The vessel's design was unlike anything he'd ever seen, a strange fusion of organic and mechanical components. A chill ran down his spine as he realized the potential threat this ship posed. "What do you need us to do?" Thomas asked, meeting the council leader's gaze. The elder Ferengi sighed heavily. "We cannot risk sending a large delegation to investigate. The unknown nature of this vessel makes it too dangerous. That is why we're turning to you, Thomas Miller. Your unique perspective and the strength of your spirit may be our best hope for understanding this new threat." Yaxa placed a hand on Thomas's shoulder, his grip firm. "I'll be with you every step of the way, Thomas. Together we'll get to the bottom of this mystery and protect the alliance we've worked so hard to forge." Thomas nodded, his resolve hardening. "We'll need a ship, something fast and stealthy. If we can get close enough without being detected, we might be able to gather intel on their capabilities and intentions." The council leader tapped a command into the console, and the hologram shifted to display a sleek, angular craft. "The Shadowhawk, our most advanced scout ship. It's equipped with state-of-the-art cloaking technology and sensor arrays. It should serve your needs well." As Thomas and Yaxa made their way to the hangar bay, the weight of their mission settled heavily on Thomas's shoulders. The fate of two civilizations now rested in their hands. He glanced at Yaxa, seeing his own determination mirrored in the Ferengi's eyes. They boarded the Shadowhawk, the ship's interior a marvel of Ferengi engineering. Thomas settled into the co-pilot seat, his fingers dancing across the unfamiliar controls as he familiarized himself with the vessel's systems. Yaxa took the helm, guiding the ship out of the hangar and into the inky void of space. As they approached the coordinates of the unidentified vessel, Thomas felt a mix of excitement and trepidation churning in his gut. He knew that whatever lay ahead, he would face it head-on, armed with the strength of the human spirit and the unwavering support of his Ferengi allies. The Shadowhawk sliced through the emptiness, a silent hunter in the night, carrying them toward an encounter that would test the very limits of their courage and resolve. The sleek Shadowhawk sliced through the void, drawing ever closer to the alien Leviathan that hung in space like a cancerous growth. Thomas gripped the controls, his knuckles white, as Yaxa furiously worked the sensor arrays. The Ferengi's face was grim, his eyes reflecting the pulsating light of the unknown ship. "I've never seen anything like it," Yaxa muttered, his voice tight with tension. "The energy signatures, the organic architecture, it's beyond anything in the Ferengi databases." As they approached, the alien vessel seemed to swell before them, dwarfing their tiny scout ship. Its matte black surface absorbed all light, while strange symbols pulsed and shifted across its hull, their meaning inscrutable. Thomas engaged the stealth systems, and the Shadowhawk shimmered, its profile fading into the background of stars. They maneuvered closer, scanners probing for any sign of life or activity. The ship remained silent, an enigma wrapped in a shroud of darkness. Suddenly, a searing lance of energy shot forth from the alien craft, bathing the Shadowhawk in blinding white light. Thomas cried out, shielding his eyes, as Yaksa frantically worked the controls. "Brace yourself," the Ferengi shouted, his voice nearly lost in the cacophony of alarms. But instead of the shattering impact of weapons fire, Thomas felt a lurching sensation deep in his gut. The Shadowhawk shuddered, caught in the grip of an unseen force. Yaksa's console sparked and went dark, the ship's systems overridden by the alien technology. With mounting horror, Thomas watched as the Shadowhawk was drawn inexorably towards the gaping maw of the alien ship. They were pulled through a nightmarish landscape of twisted, organic corridors, the walls pulsing with a sickly bioluminescence. Shadows skittered at the edges of Thomas's vision, hinting at unspeakable horrors lurking just out of sight. The beam deposited them in a vast cavernous chamber that seemed to throb with malevolent life. The air was thick and cloying, smelling of decay and some sharp alien musk. In the center of the chamber stood a towering insectoid being, its chitinous exoskeleton gleaming in the eerie light. A dozen compound eyes fixed on Thomas and Yaksa, glittering with cold, inhuman intelligence. "Welcome, human and Ferengi," the creature said, its voice a grating buzz that set Thomas's teeth on edge. "I am Xyloth, emissary of the Krill Collective. We have been observing your species, and we have deemed you unworthy of existence." Thomas stepped forward, his heart hammering against his ribs. He forced himself to meet Xyloth's unblinking gaze, a shiver running down his spine at the utter alienness he saw there. "What gives you the right to make such a judgment?" he demanded, his voice ringing with a courage he didn't quite feel. "We have done nothing to provoke you." Xyloth's mandibles twitched in a parody of a smile, a low clicking sound emerging from deep within its thorax. "Your very existence is a provocation, human," it said. "Your species is a chaos factor, a threat to the perfect order we seek to impose upon the galaxy. The Ferengi too shall fall before the might of the Krill Collective." As if on cue, the chamber filled with the skittering of countless insectoid soldiers, their carapaces glinting in the sickly light. They surrounded Thomas and Yaksa, a living wall of chitinous horror, their wicked-looking blades and barbed appendages poised to strike. Thomas glanced at Yaksa, seeing his own grim determination mirrored in the Ferengi's eyes. They stood back to back, ready to fight, to survive, to warn their peoples of the terrible threat that had emerged from the depths of space. The Krill Collective loomed before them, a nightmare made flesh, but they would not face it alone. The strength of their newfound alliance, the unbreakable bond forged in the crucible of shared adversity, would be their greatest weapon against the coming darkness. The chitinous horde surged forward, a nightmarish wave of clicking mandibles and razor-sharp claws. Yaksa leapt into their midst, a blur of motion as he delivered precise strikes to their segmented bodies. His Ferengi martial arts training served him well, each blow aimed at the weak points in the Krill's exoskeletons. Thomas drew his plasma pistol and opened fire, the blue bolts searing through the air and finding their marks with deadly precision. The acrid scent of burnt chitin filled the chamber as the Krill soldiers fell, their lifeless bodies twitching on the pulsating floor. But for every insectoid warrior they felled, two more seemed to take its place. The relentless tide of Krill soldiers pressed in, their numbers threatening to overwhelm the human and Ferengi duo. Thomas, his heart pounding in his chest, realized the hopelessness of their situation. They couldn't fight their way out, not against these odds. He turned to Xyloth, the towering emissary of the Krill Collective, and shouted over the din of battle. "Wait! If you destroy us, you'll never uncover the secret of the human spirit, the very thing that makes us a chaos factor in your eyes." Xyloth cocked his head, his multifaceted eyes glittering with curiosity. He raised a spindly appendage, and the Krill soldiers froze in place, an eerie stillness descending upon the chamber. "Speak, human," Xyloth hissed. "What is this secret you speak of?" Thomas, his mind racing, began to weave a tale of human resilience. He spoke of the countless challenges his species had overcome, of the indomitable spirit that drove them to explore, to discover, to push the boundaries of what was possible. As he spoke, Thomas caught Yaxa's eye and subtly signaled towards the scout ship. The Ferengi, understanding the unspoken plan, began to inch closer to the vessel, ready to make a break for it at a moment's notice. Xyloth listened, enraptured by Thomas's words. The humans' tales of triumph against adversity, of the unyielding nature of the human spirit, seemed to strike a chord within the alien emissary. "Your spirit is indeed strong, human," Xyloth finally spoke, his voice a discordant symphony. "But strength alone cannot save you from the Krill collective." Suddenly, Yaxa sprang into action. He hurled a plasma grenade at the chamber's organic walls, the explosive device adhering to the pulsating surface. The grenade detonated with a blinding flash and a deafening boom, the shockwave sending the Krill soldiers reeling. Thomas and Yaxa seized the opportunity, sprinting for the scout ship as the chamber shook, and the insectoid warriors scattered in confusion. They leapt into the vessel, Thomas taking the controls, while Yaxa manned the weapons. The scout ship blasted free of the Krill vessel, its engines roaring as they tore through the organic corridors. Krill soldiers poured out from every crevice, their weapons spitting streams of searing energy at the fleeing craft. Thomas wove the ship through the onslaught, his hands flying over the controls with a desperate precision. Yaxa returned fire, the ship's plasma cannons cutting swathes through the pursuing Krill. With a final burst of speed, they burst free from the alien ship, the inky void of space enveloping them like a welcome embrace. Thomas punched in the coordinates for the nearest Ferengi outpost, his heart still racing from their narrow escape. They had to warn both the Ferengi Empire and Earth of this new, terrifying threat. The Krill Collective, with their advanced technology and their unsettling ability to deem entire species unworthy of existence, posed a danger unlike any they had faced before. As the scout ship hurtled through the stars, Thomas and Yaxa shared a look of grim determination. They had survived the Krill's clutches, but they knew that this was only the beginning. The true fight, the battle for the survival of their peoples, was still to come. The Shadow Hawk shuddered as it dropped out of warp, the massive Ferengi space station looming before them. Thomas gripped the armrests as Yaxa guided the ship into the docking bay, the scout craft shaking as the station's tractor beams locked on. As soon as the airlock hissed open, Thomas and Yaxa were running, their boots pounding against the metal deck plates. They burst into the station's command center, startling the Ferengi officers manning the consoles. "We need to see Commander Zoran immediately," Thomas panted, his face still pale from their harrowing escape. "It's urgent." Moments later, they were ushered into Zoran's office. The battle-hardened Ferengi rose from his desk, his eyes narrowing as he took in their disheveled appearance. "Yaxa, Thomas," he said, his voice gruff, "I take it your mission did not go as planned." Thomas shook his head, the words tumbling out in a rush. "The Krill Collective, they ambushed us. They're planning to wipe out both our species, to impose their twisted version of order on the galaxy." Zoran's face darkened, his fists clenching at his sides. "The Krill Collective," he growled, a name spoken only in whispers, a nightmare from the darkest corners of the galaxy. "They are an ancient race, as powerful as they are merciless." Thomas leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Commander, we have to stop them. The Ferengi and humanity must stand together against this threat. Alone, we will fall. But united, we have a chance." Zoran was silent for a long moment, his gaze distant. Finally, he nodded, his jaw set with determination. "You are right, Thomas. We must rally our allies, gather our strength. The Ferengi will send emissaries to every corner of the galaxy, seeking aid from all who value freedom and diversity." Yaxa bowed his head, his eyes glinting with resolve. "I will not fail, Commander." Zoran then fixed his gaze on Thomas. And you, Thomas, you must return to Earth. Convince your leaders of the danger we face. Humanity's strength and spirit will be crucial in the battles to come." Thomas nodded, his heart racing at the thought of the task before him. "I will do whatever it takes, Commander. Earth will stand with the Ferengi against the Krill Collective." As Zoran began barking orders, mobilizing the Ferengi forces for war, Thomas and Yaksa prepared for their own missions. They clasped forearms, their bond forged in the crucible of shared danger and purpose. "Stay safe out there," Thomas said, his voice rough with emotion. "I'll see you on the other side of this." Yaksa grinned, his sharp teeth glinting in the harsh light of the command center. "Don't worry about me, Thomas. It's the Krill who should be afraid." With a final nod, they parted ways, each setting off on a desperate race against time. Thomas boarded a sleek Ferengi cruiser, its powerful engines propelling him toward Earth and the monumental task of rallying humanity. As the stars streaked past the viewport, Thomas closed his eyes, steeling himself for the challenges ahead. He thought of the countless alien species he and Yaksa would need to win over, the hostile forces they would face, the treacherous anomalies that lurked in the depths of space. But through it all, the indomitable human spirit burned within him, a beacon of hope in the gathering darkness. Thomas knew, with unshakable certainty, that this very spirit would be the key to victory against the Krill Collective. For in the face of annihilation, when all seemed lost, it was the unyielding will of sentient beings to fight, to survive, to forge their own destiny that would light the way. And as Earth grew larger on the view screen, a blue and green jewel suspended in the infinite void, Thomas knew that the final battle was fast approaching. The Krill Collective, with their vast armadas and their ruthless thirst for conquest, would learn the true power of unity, of the unbreakable bonds forged between species in the defense of liberty. The galaxy would tremble as the Krill Collective, with their vast armadas and their ruthless thirst for conquest, would learn the true power of unity, of the unbreakable bonds forged between species in the defense of liberty. The galaxy would tremble as the armies of the allied worlds streaked across the stars, united in purpose and resolve. Flashes of light split the void as ships dropped out of warp, disgorging fighters and bombers into the maelstrom of battle. The Krill ships loomed before the allied armada, their twisted biomechanical hulls pulsing with malevolent energies. Flights of insectoid strike craft poured from the Krill carriers, their plasma weapons glowing with sickly light. Thomas and Yaksa, at the helm of an agile Ferengi fighter, plunged into the heart of the battle. The human's hands flew over the controls, sending the ship into dizzying spins and rolls as he evaded the incoming fire. Yaksa, his eyes narrowed in concentration, unleashed a relentless barrage from the fighter's cannons, each shot finding its mark with uncanny precision. Around them, the battle raged with furious intensity. Allied ships clashed with their Krill counterparts, lances of energy crisscrossing the starscape. Fighters dueled in intricate ballets of destruction, while capital ships traded devastating broadsides. The hulls of stricken vessels blossomed into fireballs, their crews consigned to oblivion in the icy depths of space. Thomas gritted his teeth as a near miss sent their fighter spinning. He righted the ship with a deft touch, his mind racing as he surveyed the grim tactical situation. The Krill forces were pressing their advantage, their superior numbers slowly but inexorably overwhelming the Allied fleet. "We need to take out their command ship," Thomas shouted over the din of battle. "It's the only way to throw them into disarray." Yaksa, his face grim, nodded in agreement. "Lead the way, my friend. I'll be right behind you." Thomas wrenched the fighter into a steep climb, angling toward the heart of the Krill formation. The enemy flagship loomed before them, a monstrous thing of pulsing flesh and flickering lights. Its hull was encrusted with weapon emplacements, each one bristling with menace. A hail of plasma fire erupted from the flagship's batteries, bracketing Thomas and Yaksa's fighter with deadly accuracy. The human jinked and wove, his piloting skills pushed to their limit as he fought to evade the onslaught. Yaksa returned fire, his shots impacting against the flagship's shields in bursts of scintillating energy. As they closed with the command ship, Thomas's heart sank. The flagship's defenses were too strong, its armor too thick. They would never be able to inflict enough damage to take it out of the fight. In that moment, a grim realization crystallized in Thomas's mind. There was only one way to end this, only one path to victory. "Yaksa, I need you to get clear," Thomas said, his voice calm despite the maelstrom of emotions raging within him. "Evacuate the fighter and link up with the rest of the fleet." Thomas shook his head, a sad smile playing across his features. "There's no other way, my friend. Someone has to take out that flagship, and we both know it can't be done with weapons alone." Understanding dawned in Yaksa's eyes, followed by a wrenching grief. "Thomas, don't do this, please." "It's the only way," Thomas said softly. "The galaxy needs you, Yaksa. The Ferengi need you. Don't let my sacrifice be in vain." With a final anguished look, Yaksa triggered the evacuation sequence. His pod blasted free of the fighter, vanishing into the swirling chaos of the battle. Thomas watched him go, a profound sense of peace settling over him. He knew what he had to do. Ignoring the tears that streamed down his face, Thomas opened a fleet-wide channel. "This is where the indomitable human spirit shines brightest," he said, his voice ringing with conviction. "In the face of certain death, we do not falter. We do not yield. We fight so that others may live to see a brighter future." With a final defiant cry, Thomas gunned the fighter's engines and plunged toward the heart of the Krill flagship. Plasma fire stitched the void around him, but he flew on, unwavering in his resolve. The flagship loomed before him, its monstrous bulk filling his viewscreen. At the last possible moment, Thomas fired his remaining missiles. They streaked ahead of his fighter, slamming into the flagship's shields in a blinding conflagration. The shields flickered and died, leaving the command ship exposed. Thomas closed his eyes, a final prayer on his lips. His fighter slammed into the flagship's hull, crumpling like tin foil as it punctured the thick armor. For a single breathless moment, all was still. Then the flagship erupted in a cataclysmic explosion, a miniature sun blooming in the heart of the Krill formation. Secondary detonations ripped through the surrounding ships, setting off a chain reaction of destruction that tore the enemy fleet asunder. A ragged cheer went up from the Allied ships as the Krill forces reeled, their cohesion shattered. The Allies pressed their attack, pouring fire into the disorganized enemy ranks. One by one, the Krill ships fell, until all that remained was a field of shattered hulks and drifting debris. In the aftermath of the battle, Yaksa gathered the leaders of the Allied forces. His face was lined with grief, his eyes haunted by the memory of Thomas's sacrifice. He looked out at the assembled throng, seeing the same mix of sorrow and triumph etched on every face. "Thomas Miller showed us the true strength of the human spirit," Yaksa said, his voice thick with emotion. "He sacrificed himself so that we might live, so that the galaxy might know freedom from the tyranny of the Krill collective. Let us honor his memory by building a future worthy of his sacrifice." As the years passed, the alliance forged in the crucible of war only grew stronger. Humanity and the Ferengi Empire, once bitter rivals, now stood as the twin pillars of galactic civilization. A new era of cooperation and understanding dawned, guided by the memory of Thomas Miller and the indomitable spirit he embodied. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.